In this video, we are going to learn about the concept of variables, and to understand the same, let us now go through one use case. So let us say we need to print the name of a student. How do you print something in JavaScript? You do that with the help of a console.log. So we can say something like a console.log of James. But after a few lines of code, let us say you want to access the name of that student again, but you haven't stored it anywhere. So how would you be able to access the same? We cannot access it yet, right? Now this sounds feasible to write a console.log of James again at wherever place we want to have it, right? Sounds good. But what will happen for the cases where you have a very big value? Let us talk about a paragraph. Would you like to manually write that paragraph again wherever you require it in your program? No, right? Doesn't sound a very good coding practice over here. So we need a mechanism, a container based mechanism where we could store these kind of values into one container, and wherever we require it in our program, we simply have to just give the name of the container and you will be able to access that particular value. So do we have such a mechanism in JavaScript? Yes, we do. That is exactly where variables come into picture. So let us specifically now talk about what are variables. So variables are the named containers used to store, change, and access the information. We are very shortly going to see each one of these use cases, which is storing the information, changing the information, and accessing the information with the help of a Replit example. Now we first declare a variable and then we assign it a value. So it's a two-step process. First you have to declare the variable and then you have to assign a value to it. So you can imagine this kind of a visual for your variables. Just consider greeting to be a container or a variable which is storing hello as a value. Animal to be a container or a variable which is storing panda as a value. Similarly for age to be a container or kind of a variable which stores 51 as a value. So how do you declare variables in JavaScript? Well, you do that with the help of a keyword. We can also call it as an identifier. It is known as var, 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 along with the name of the variable. So let us see this particular example. This is how you're going to declare your variables. Var space first name or whatever name you would like to wish for the same. So you have to say var space the name of your variable. Let us see that with the help of a Replit example. Let's visit Replit and have a look at one of these use cases. I can say var space first name. This is known as declaration of a variable. Now what will happen if I try to directly access this particular variable? What is the thing to notice over here? I haven't even assigned any value to this variable as of now. What will happen in these kind of cases if I try to execute this file? You can see the output is coming out to be undefined. Let us now also try to understand what do we mean by undefined. So in all the use cases where your variables are declared but the values are not assigned, for all those variables, if you're going to access them, you're going to get your value as undefined. Undefined is the default value given by JavaScript for all unintentionally missing purposes. So in simpler words, we can say that whenever you have some variables declared but no values assigned to them, in such cases you're going to get your answer as undefined. This is also a primitive data type which is just belonging to the category of numbers, booleans, and other primitive data types as well. Similarly, we have one more primitive data type which is known as null. Now what is null? Let us say that you're going to make a program in which you want to declare a variable but you don't know its initial value. So as a good coding practice, we can show its intentional absence. What do I mean by intentional absence of a value? Var b equals null. So we are explicitly giving a value null. It simply represents the intentional absence of a value. We are simply trying to say that at the time of initialization of this variable, we don't know its value currently, but later on in the program, after performing certain operations, we might update the value of the variable b. So that is what is meant by null over here. Difference between undefined and null is that undefined is used for unintentionally missing values, which is something that only JavaScript should give us back. We should never be declaring it from our side. Similarly, null is something that as a good coding practice we should be using for all the intentionally absent values at this point of time. So this is the difference between undefined and null. Now, so we have understood that how we are going to declare our variables. Let us now see the further use cases. Now, how do you assign a value to the variable? We've already seen that we first have to declare a variable and then we have to assign a value to it. So the first step is pretty much clear, but how do we assign now? Pretty simple syntax. We simply have to say first name equals Crio. So coming back to Replit, instead of just directly consoling it, I can just say a first name equals Crio.Do. And now if I try to access it by saying console.log of first name, let us see what is the value we're going to get now. Now we have a value Crio.do printed over here. So that is the reason we say that variables are the named containers. Why do we say named containers? Because this is the name of the variable. This is the name of the container, which is used to store some information. You're storing Crio.do as a value in the first name variable, right? We also say that they are used for accessing the information. Aren't you trying to access the value over here by using a console.log? Yes, we are. We can simply say accessing information for this use case. We can say storing information for this use case. What else is it used for? It is also used for changing the information. What do I mean by changing the information of a variable? Simply updating or reassigning a value to a variable, right? I can also say after this console.log, first name should now be equals to Rahul. So previously it was Crio.do, but now I want to update the value to Rahul. I can call this as reassignment of a value or simple updation, right? That is what we can call over here. So this is how you reassign a value to a variable. And obviously, if I now try to access this particular variable, let's see what is going to be the output. If you now see, this becomes Rahul. The first console.log gives us Crio.do, but later on I have updated it to Rahul, after which again I'm trying to do a console.log, which gives me the output Rahul. So the reassignment of values to a variable is also allowed in JavaScript. So this is what we mean by the definition: storing the information, changing the information, and accessing the information. So this is how the assignment part of the variable works. And as we have already seen, this is how reassignment works. You can update the value of a variable to some other value. The good thing to notice over here is that if you have declared an initial value of a variable to be a string, it is not necessary that you have to update it to a string only. You can change the data type as well while changing the value. As you can see in this example, temp has now been updated to 10. So previously it was a string, but now it is a number. So that is the reason we say that JavaScript is a dynamically typed language. What do we mean by this dynamically typed language? When you don't have to specify the data types that a variable needs to store. Those kind of languages are simply known as dynamically typed languages. So in the beginning, it could store a string. Later on, it can store a number as well. So we are dynamically determining what is going to be the data type of the value which is stored in a variable. Right. Now, what do we mean by redeclaration? Redeclaration is just something where we are trying to again declare a variable with the same name. You see at line number 1, temp named variable is already declared, but you are trying to do it again with the same name at line number 3. Is it allowed in JavaScript? Well, redeclaration with var is definitely allowed in JavaScript. So let us see the same with the help of an example. We can comment all of these. And I can say var temp equals Crio console.log of temp. Later on, I want to say var temp equals Crio.do and then again a console.log of temp. Let us see if this works or not. And as you can see, previously this was a Crio, but now it is a Crio.do. You must be thinking, what is the difference between reassignment and redeclaration then? Well, in reassignment, you're again declaring a variable which is getting allotted a fresh memory, right? But in reassignment, at the same memory, you're just trying to update the value of the variable. So this is the difference between both of them, right? So this is how the redeclaration works in JavaScript with the identifier var And this is how overall variables work in JavaScript. You will be performing an activity dealing with declaring variables. So you have to declare a variable named greeter using the var identifier. So it will be something like var greeter equals to hey hi. Just after that, you have to print the variable greeter and you have to check what is the value it is printing. Post that, you have to try some redeclaration, and redeclaration simply means when you're trying to redeclare a variable with the same name. So when you say var greeter equals to say hello instead, again you have to check this time what is the value that greeter is printing. So these are the 4 steps that you need to perform. So pause this video now and get started with the activity. Alright, so by now if you have completed this activity, let's try to see how we can solve it easily. So let's move back to Replit, and for this activity I'll be creating a new file. So in the activities folder itself, I'll just say new file activity3.js. Alright, so here's the code that we have to write for the same. I can say var greeter equals to hey hi, post which I can say console.log of greeter, right? After which, if I try to redeclare the variable with var greeter equals to say hello instead, again if I'm checking console.log of greeter, we need to check if the values have been updated or not. Okay, so let's try to run this particular file. I will say node space activities slash activity3.js, and that is going to be hey hi and then say hello instead. Now why did that happen? Because in JavaScript it's a line by line execution. So we have declared greeter variable equals to hey hi, after which I am saying console.log of greeter. So by the time line number 2 has to be executed, hey hi is the value which is stored in the memory, because of which hey hi gets printed over here. After line number 2, when my line number 4 has to be executed, since the redeclaration is allowed in case of var variables, now the value is going to be say hello instead for the greeter variable. So when line number 5 has to execute, it will take the fresh updated greeter value that we have just updated on line number 4, which is going to be say hello instead, which is the reason the next output comes out to be say hello instead. So that is how you have to perform this activity.